Okay, we are going to show you how to take the motor off of the Motion bike. This is the Panasonic mid-drive motor. In front of the bike, I've got laid out the tools that we're going to use: assorted Allen wrenches, Phillips screwdriver, another little multi-tool with a flat blade on it, a 12 millimeter wrench, socket wrench and combination wrench. I've got a snap ring plier. I've got a crank arm puller and a 14 millimeter with a 14 millimeter wrench on it. So the first thing we're going to do is take the battery off the bike. With the key, turn the key forward, take the battery out, set it aside. Take the key out, keep it with the battery. Next thing I'm going to do is pull the crank arms. That's where you need your flat blade. If there is a dust cap, I'm going to pop that off, take the dust cap out, put it in a little container. Then I'm going to use my 14 millimeter wrench in reverse, and I'm going to loosen that nut, and I'm going to pull the nut off. There's the nut that was on the holding the crank arm to the shaft. Next, I'm going to use the crank arm puller, and because there's a nut in there, I have to extend it all the way in, and I'm going to thread that into the crank arm all the way in until it's tight. Then I'm going to spin the puller and pull the crank arm. Now those were a little loose because I just put them on there loosely. I didn't tighten the bolts down from the last removal. There's one crank arm. This is the right side. The right crank arm is marked with an R, but you might want to keep them separate so you know which is right and which is left. Now I'm going to pull the left crank arm as well. Pull the bolt. Again, this one's not going to be tight because it wasn't tight on the after the last time I pulled them off. Tighten that puller all the way down until it's in tight. Spin the puller, pull the crank off the shaft. Remove the puller. Set those aside. Now we're done with the crank arm puller. Next is to remove the chain guard. We're going to pull the Allen or the Phillips head screw out at the top. There's the screw. Put that aside. You slightly rock the chain guard and push forward, and it comes off. There are tabs, little plastic tabs here on the front of the chain guard that connect in these slots. So notice how that comes apart, and then you'll know how to put it back together. Now we take the chain guard and put it aside. We need to now pull the left side guard off. There is a bolt, or rather a Phillips head screw here in the back side of this. Screwdriver in. Remove the screw. Same as with the chain guard, this piece is going to pull forward and then come off. There's that piece. And put that aside. I'm also going to remove the two screws that hold the top battery connector in place. There's one. And there's two. I'm not going to remove this piece of plastic yet, but since I had the Phillips screwdriver, I'm just removing those two screws. Now, the next step is to remove the tensioner for the chain. And that is held in place by one 4 millimeter Allen head bolt 4mm Allen wrench in and just unscrew it. And it's going to come right off. Screw is out, and that just pops out of place. Take the chain up off the motor pulley and off the front chain ring. Okay. It's still held in place by this mount bracket, which is for the chain ring, or the chain guard. Note the orientation of this, because when you put it back on, we're going to need to put it back in the same orientation. Now we are going to remove the motor. To do that, I need to pull off, there's 3 mounting bolts, fixing bolts. 1, 2, 3. And it's a 12mm nut on this right side, and on this bike it's a 12mm bolt head on the left side. Some bikes have 5mm Allen screws, Allen head bolts rather, on there, but this bike has 12mm heads. So I'm going to take my box end wrench and my socket, set it to remove the bolt. I'm going to put the socket on one of the 2 front bolts and just loosen it. There, you take the bolt off, push the bolt out. I'm going to keep the bolt and nut together, set it aside. I'm going to take the next one in the front off as well. Put the box end on the left side, socket on the right, loosen it. Now I'm just going to take that off. Notice this metal bracket that holds the front of the chain guard fell loose. It is now loose and it can come off its bolt, and you can set that aside as well. Push the bolt through, take it out, and again I'm going to keep the bolt and nut together here. Set that aside. Now I'm going to loosen the 3rd bolt. Put the box end on the back side. Get my wrench on it. There it is. Socket here, and I'm going to loosen this side. Tight. Okay, there's the bolt. Now this chain guard mount is also loose, so that's going to come off. And see how the chain comes off with it. Now that piece is going to go aside with the bolt. I'm not going to take this 3rd bolt out yet, because what I need to do now is loosen the battery terminals up top. And they're held in place by this plastic guard. And to loosen that plastic guard, we've removed the 2 bolts already, or screws. There's a little tab on this right side. Put a flat blade in, loosen the tab just a little bit, and then this whole piece should just slide right up. There we go. Don't force anything. That just comes off. Set that aside. Now notice the battery terminal is loose. That's just going to slide down through that slot when I remove this bolt. But before we take out that last bolt, I need to remove the connections, the motor connections, and they are inside a little plastic pouch which is stored inside this frame hole. So I'm just going to push them through. And on the other side, you can see a little plastic pouch with connectors inside it. I'm going to pull the plastic pouch out. Be careful not to tear it, because it will tear if you're not careful. Slip everything out. Now there is some black wires that are for the lights, front and rear light. And then there is a couple of other connectors here which are not used. One of these is for light power coming from the motor if we didn't have a hub dynamo, and the other one is for a walking throttle, which we don't have on this bike. And then this large connector. There's a clip here. I'm going to press, there's a connector clip in the middle. I'm just going to press that and pull these two sides apart. There you can see the clip and the receiver side, so that you press that clip in and you can pull the other side out. Be careful not to pull on the wires, which are fragile. Then the last connection is this green ground wire is screwed here to the motor housing. So I'm going to use this Phillips screwdriver again, and I'm going to remove this little black screw. And I'm going to pull that screw out. There's the little screw, and then I can just pull the ground wire out, and I'm going to put that screw back in place. So I don't want to lose it. It's very little. So little I can't even get a hold of it here. Let's try that. Okay, there's the little screw back in place. Now the motor is disconnected, and I can drop the motor by pulling out this third bolt. I'm going to go to the other side. I'm going to hold the motor from the underside. I'm going to push the bolt through, pull the bolt all the way through, and now the motor will just drop down and out. Don't forget this connector here for the batteries needs to slip down through the hole. Now the motor comes out, and the motor is separate. The reverse procedure installs the motor.